Thank you, Jen. This time I'll take a motion to close executive session and to reopen the public meeting. Is there a motion? Trustee Cassell, second. Trustee Golio, all in favor? Okay, great. Meeting will come to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance of the flag and a prayer by Trustee Taylor. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It almost seems as though every time we get together every 2 weeks, there's another incident in the world that reminds us of how lucky we are to live where we live, to have the freedoms that we have, to have the safety and security, but also how important it is to make sure that in guarding that, we also guard our values. So I'll ask everyone for a very brief moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Village Hall. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for Tuesday, May 23rd, 2017. Just need to make a motion here to add a couple of things onto our agenda tonight at the tail end. One will be action item number 4, which is to grant a request from the Dobbs Ferry Historical Society to hang a banner at Gould Park for their house tour event, which will be on June 4th. So can I have a motion to add that to the agenda? Trustee Golio, second. Trustee Sullivan, all in favor? Okay, so that'll be added. And then if we could also motion to add action item number 5, which will be to approve the date for the Holiday Hustle.
Yes.
Holiday Hustle.
Holiday Hustle.
Which we'll get that date when we get to that item. Can I have a motion for that as well, to add that to the agenda? Trustee Rosillo, second. Trustee Corrales, discussion, all in favor? Okay, great. So those 2 items are added. Otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward on the agenda tonight. Our big item is the public hearing for consideration of the adoption of a local law to amend various portions of Chapter 300 of the Village Code of the Village of Dobbs Ferry. This would be historic provisions by modifying the village's zoning and land use code. So to begin, I need to take a motion, look for a motion to open this public hearing. Trustee Taylor, second. Trustee Cassell, discussion, all in favor? Okay, great. This public hearing is open. We're very excited about this whole initiative, and we're happy to have Sonia Terjanian back again tonight, who will give us an update and a presentation on the action that we're considering, which is the creation of historic districts in the Village of Dobbs Ferry. This is an initiative that Sonia and her group has been chairing the Historic District Task Force for some time now, and there's been a lot of work that's gone into it. So we've really come to the point of the sort of final stage of the village board now, looking at considering taking some action to incorporate this into the village code. I think we still have some issues we need to talk to tonight, so I think it'll be a lively discussion, and we're going to need your help, Sonia, to answer some questions, I think, of the board and members of the community that are here that might have some issues as well. And Darius, on the legal side, you've been involved. We'll bounce some things off of you, I'm sure. So I think to start, Sonia, I ask you to come and do your thing and with your presentation, and then we'll have a question and answer period from the board. Dwight, I think, thanks for coming tonight. We'll certainly be looking to you for input as well, and then we'll take comment from the public certainly tonight as well. Hi, Sonia.
Hi, thank you. As you know, I'm Sonia Terjanian, the chair of the Dobbs Ferry Historic District Task Force. Tonight I'm going to give a very abbreviated version of the presentation that you saw a couple of weeks ago. Just for anyone new who's here or watching online, just to sort of give an overview of what the legislation contains and what the different sections are and what we're hoping to do. Before I get into that, I do want to just one more time go over quickly the benefits of historic designation and regulation. Why is it important to designate and preserve historic landmarks? So, one of the #1 reasons is property values. Properties within local historic districts appreciate at rates greater than the local market overall, as well as faster than similar non-designated neighborhoods. Historic districts are also less vulnerable to market volatility from interest rate fluctuations and a really important one. Another interesting reason that not a lot of people may know about is sustainability. When you demolish old buildings and replace them with new ones, you're creating a lot of waste, and you're also not using all of the energy that is stored in that old building. The Environmental Protection Agency has found that building construction debris accounts for 1/3 of the waste generated in the United States. A building of typical size in the downtown of New York Village, if demolished, occupies approximately the same amount of space in a landfill as 1.3 million aluminum cans. So we can all work really hard at recycling our aluminum cans, but if we're tearing down houses and throwing them away, it's, we're not doing that. Another way to think about it is in terms of embodied energy, which is the measure of how much energy was expended to construct a building and its parts. And if that building is demolished, instead of retrofitting its parts for greater energy efficiency, all of that embodied energy is lost. So we're saving a lot of energy and a lot of effort by just retrofitting older homes to meet our modern standards. Another reason, which is really relevant in Dobbs Ferry, I think, is heritage tourism. Those who visit historic sites and areas where a great deal of historic preservation activity has occurred generally spend 30% more than other tourists and stay nearly twice as long. I think there's a lot of potential here for capitalizing on that. And less tangible, of course, are the community benefits. By focusing on historically significant neighborhoods of Dobbs Ferry, we help our community feel more connected to the story of our village, and this makes people feel like they're part of something special. And it builds community pride, which encourages long-term engagement and investment in our village. So those are some of the benefits. Now I'm just going to briefly run through the sections of the legislation that we're proposing and tell you what they're all about. So first of all is the application process. How do you go about designating a building or a district as historic? So to designate a single building or a landmark, you would fill out the individual property form. And we've designed a form that has a score sheet, which helps you weigh all the different factors that go into deciding whether something qualifies as a historic landmark. The age of the building, the condition of the original features, people who might have lived there, who the architect was, things like that. It's a non-binding guideline, but it just helps everybody grade buildings on the same scale. To designate a historic district, you would fill out those individual forms for each property in the district, as well as an overarching umbrella district application. And again, you would use that score sheet. This time you would use it to decide if each building in the district would be considered contributing or non-contributing. So an example of a non-contributing building is like the gas station in Irvington's downtown district, which falls within the boundaries but is not itself historic, so it's called non-contributing, which means it doesn't have to adhere to the same regulations as the contributing buildings. And then 50% of the property owners within the proposed district must consent to the designation. So then the AHRB holds a public hearing and they make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees, and it's the Board of Trustees who ultimately decides whether or not to grant historic status. So once a building or a district is designated as historical, they are subject to what's called binding historical review. So what does that mean? Exterior alterations to historic properties require a certificate of appropriateness. This does not apply to ordinary maintenance and repair, as long as you are not making a change in the design, the building materials, or the outward appearance. The AHRB will issue the certificate of appropriateness if the proposed work will not have a substantial adverse effect on the aesthetic, historical, or architectural significance and value of the individual landmark or of the district. The proposed legislation defines principles for making these decisions, and it lists specific factors to consider, including extensive design requirements, which are a work in progress. They're being developed by Steve Tilley. We're basing them on the design guidelines that Irvington, I think, voted on last night and just put into place for their historic district. So they'll be very similar to those.
I'm sorry to interrupt. interrupt you. I just, while you're on this slide, wanted to ask a question. So in a historic landmark building, if you're renovating a bathroom or a kitchen, and you're using different materials than were inside that building originally, that's not subject to it? It's only the things that are visible from the outside?
Only exterior alterations.
Okay, thanks.
And the guidelines will make it clear that the things that are visible from the street we're gonna pay more attention to those than things that happen in the back, for example. So
Yeah,
it's
so
really
it's
mostly
the
what's
front-facing elements are really all that we're talking about.
Right. So just briefly, why do we need these design requirements? First of all, they can be an educational tool. They help people learn about the architectural history of their homes, why their homes look the way they do, what style they are. That can help guide their decision-making about changes. We want to also ensure consistent regulation across the board. We're reducing subjective judgment calls and avoiding trend-driven design decisions. So it's really trying to take away the guesswork in deciding what's appropriate and not appropriate. It's important to note that historic buildings are not meant to be frozen in time. They should be updated and adapted to modern life, and well-written guidelines will help owners make those updates in a way that doesn't erode a building's historic character. So demolition of a historic landmark, this is something we wanted to really put a lot of teeth into. So if somebody wants to tear down a historic building in Dobbs Ferry, they have to go through a fairly rigorous process. It's more rigorous than what's in place for regular demolition permits. So first you would file an application for a historic building demolition permit with the building inspector, who would make a recommendation to the HRB, who would consider the application in a public hearing, and then make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees, who would make the final decision on whether or not that historic building can be torn down. Demolition by neglect is another important topic. This is where buildings fall into a state of disrepair to the point that they become dangerous or a nuisance and have to be torn down. This is where we get into the affirmative maintenance and repair requirement. So historic properties cannot be allowed to fall into a serious state of disrepair. We define what those types of prohibited disrepair are. Building inspector and the HRB then can require owners to make necessary repairs, and if they're not made, the Board of Trustees can have the repairs made at the expense of the village, with costs placed as a lien against the property. And then finally, the certificate of hardship is a remedy for owners who feel that they can't afford to renovate their homes in the way recommended by the AHRB. So if you feel like it's not financially possible to do what they're asking, you can apply for a certificate of hardship. To do that, you have to show that the denial of the certificate of appropriateness will keep you from earning a reasonable return on your investment, or that it will deny you the beneficial use of your property. And you'll have to demonstrate that the requested relief won't alter the essential character of the neighborhood and that the hardship is not self-created. So you submit the application for the certificate of hardship, the HRB has a public hearing. In the meantime, they try to work with the homeowner to develop a plan for making the improvement in a way that provides a reasonable return while maintaining a historic character. We envision this as a collaborative process, and then the HRB will grant or deny the certificate of hardship. So finally, I want to just address this idea of certified local governments, which is a little bit of a point of debate with this legislation. The state of New York has set up a program called Certified Local Governments as an incentive to get everybody to adopt their legislation the way they have written it. And so if you adopt their model legislation exactly as is or close to as is, you will become a CLG and you'll be eligible for certain benefits. The state is required to set aside 10% of its federal historic preservation allocation every year for grants to CLGs. And those grants are for training, public education, surveys and designations, so where you look at every single house in the village and decide which ones are historic. Demonstration projects, which are restoration projects that show the rest of the world how great we are. doing what we do. And local capacity building, so hiring experts, bringing in consultants, that kind of thing. Past grants have ranged from $3,000 to $60,000, with most awards falling between $5,000 and $15,000. So that's just sort of top line of what CLG status gets you. Currently, the legislation we're proposing tonight does not meet the CLG requirements in two important ways. They say that the ordinance should not require homeowner consent. We are asking for 50% of homeowners within a proposed district to agree to the designation. Secondly, they recommend that the Preservation Commission should be a unique entity separate from the AHRB. So they want to have a Preservation Commission, which serves as a separate board that reviews applications for certificates of appropriateness exactly the same way the AHRB does now. And they are inserted into the process. You know, you still get your site plan review and everything as you do today, but instead of going to AHRB, you would go to the Preservation Commission. They recommend this because they really want specialists on this board who are trained in preservation. We currently have a requirement in our code that one member of the AHRB should be a specialist in preservation. So I think an argument can be made that our AHRB satisfies this requirement, and our CLG coordinator has told me that it's possibly negotiable and we can make a case for it. So, but you know, there might be benefits to having a separate commission anyway that we would consider. So.
And Sonia, while you're on that topic, could you share with us why the legislation put out by the task force right now has disqualifiers in it that take us out of getting these grants and training?
So there was a lot of discussion about this in the task force about certainly consent was the biggest one. You know, should we just be able to impose historic district status on whoever we want without getting any consent? And our task force was evenly split on that. We actually voted and it came up 50-50 on whether we should require consent or not. So we decided to ask you all what you thought about that. So,
Thanks.
so that's it. This was supposed to say discussion on it.
Great, thanks for that. I think that really, you know, the slides here really touched on the key points, and this last one, of course, is the one I think we'll discuss. We'll have a lot of discussion around in terms of the consent and the CLG structure in general. So I think I'd start just by taking some comments from the board, and if any of the board has any particular questions for you and or Darius, and we can kind of go back and forth a little bit, and then we'll take some comments from the public for sure. In no particular order, does anybody have any particular questions or comments for the board?
Yeah, I may have more, but right off the bat, when you talk about renovating buildings, how do they feel about like solar panels and that sort of stuff? Is that allowable on these buildings?
So that's an issue that's going to come up when we look at the design requirements. Irvington's design guidelines currently recommend against solar panels on the front of the roof. They make the case that there's a lot you can do to improve the energy efficiency of your historic home before you go solar. Just because the panels at this point are so obtrusive and disrupt, you know, really the character of the neighborhood. I can see that being a debatable point. So I think that's going to come up when we go through our design requirements.
And triple paned windows would be acceptable as long as the design was part of, met with the architecture of the building.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we don't want to get in the way of energy efficiency.
Could you describe a little bit more about the design guidelines that Irvington adopted in terms of, what is this, I mean, I guess give us and the public a sense of what does it really mean if you're in a historic district? What typically does it limit you from doing or help you do or kind of thing?
So it has a lot to do with materials. So, you know, it discourages the use so things like vinyl on the
Siding.
facade, siding, windows, you know, roofs. They really encourage people to go back to the sort of original materials like slate and cedar shingles, but they understand that in a lot of cases people have to get something that looks similar, that is reminiscent of those original materials, but might be an asphalt shingle or something like that. And so they kind of have to work one-on-one with homeowners to figure that out. A lot of it is-
In other words, it's not always requiring original materials.
Not always, not always. I mean, windows are a great example because nobody makes flimsy single pane windows anymore. I mean, they're all energy efficient, they all have double or triple glazing, but some have real wood mullions that are through the glass, and then some have them that are just stuck on. And so it's a matter of, you know, let's get as close to the original as we can within the modern reality.
So I
Sonia,
think we're gonna have to look at those, we don't have that full list of the guidelines yet, so that's something that we'll definitely be looking at more closely, and we'll be talking with you more about. Vic, do you have anything?
yeah, so first of all, I think, all the work you've done on this is fantastic, and, I do think conceptually it's very important for us to recognize potential historic structures or areas. I guess the place that I just start to struggle with a little bit, and I know you brought up the 50% consent, is what the board was split on. It kind of went back to what Donna brought up right away. If I want to own my home, I want to put solar power panels on it, and I happen to be in now this historic district, that's a problem potentially. Because the back of my house doesn't get any sun, it's really only the front of my house. So those are the kind of things that I get concerned about on the consent front. Should it be 100%? I don't know what the right answer is, but that's the area I think that I still need to think through and that I struggle with as, I've listened to all this. The idea and what you're trying to accomplish, I think is fantastic. I just think with making it fair for homeowners in a particular neighborhood that may be designated under this, and I know the restrictions, everybody's saying, well, it's not as strict as, you think, you can still do things in your home, you can make modifications, but it's almost like you're on the defense then as a homeowner, and you're gonna be fighting for things that you may wanna do with your property that you would not normally have to do. So that's kind of where I'm a little bit stuck right now, and I've heard a lot of good argument both ways, and I definitely don't think it should be less than 50% when it comes to consent, but it's almost like, why wouldn't the whole neighborhood really have to consent, or do we go house by house? Once again, I don't know what the right answer is right now, but.
Yeah, I actually just this afternoon spent an hour on the phone with Lee Ellman from Yonkers. He's the director of planning in Yonkers, and they have had this legislation in place for 20 years. They're a CLG, and they don't require consent. And he gave me some great examples where neighborhoods came to the Landmark Commission and said, we want to be designated historic. And during the public hearing process, there was enough objection from homeowners in the proposed districts that they ended up not designating. There were two large districts of, he said, around 150 homes where the public objected strenuously enough that they did not get designation. And he felt like that process of having people come to a public hearing and express their concerns and educate themselves on what it really means to be a historic district and actually have a debate about it is more effective than just asking homeowners to sign a petition saying they're for it or against it. And I've kind of come around to that point of view that I feel like the public hearing is really the place where it should happen, and it should kind of be more of a judgment call of the Board of Trustees to look at why exactly people want to designate, why people don't want to, and make that decision kind of, on a case-by-case basis.
Larry?
Can I, yeah, I mean, just to clarify something here, and it's interesting that your, group went back and forth on this issue, because I think, I don't want to speak for all the trustees, but I can speak for, I think, a majority of them, that all of us have kind of been on both sides of this. And you and I have spoken, just trying to sort this issue through it. In a way, I wonder if just some of this isn't the fact that the consent, calling that a consent is in a way a misnomer. It's more of a nomination of a neighborhood to then be put through a process whereby, in our case, the HRB, the Board of Trustees, where there are public hearings. And if some percentage of the neighbors want it to be nominated to potentially be an historic district, there then is a public discussion and a forum to figure it out. I still have a lot of concerns about the idea of compromising property rights. And unfortunately, every single one of the differences that you mentioned when you were talking about the architectural changes or, appropriateness, it was going from down here to more, from less expensive to more expensive. And I wondered, have there ever been any studies done, or is there any research that could be pointed to as to how those differentials would work themselves out? In other words, to update a 3-bedroom home in an historic district versus not, is that 10% difference, or is it
Difference in cost.
100% difference, right, in the cost of the rental?
No, in almost every case, you can find ways to do it in a visually appropriate way. The standard we're trying to meet is a certificate of appropriateness. So it just has to be appropriate. It does not have to be exactly what was done in 1865. So we're looking for ways of creating a sort of visual impression that maintains character. And so if you can't afford to have a slate roof, for example, there are a lot of roof products out there that look really similar to a slate roof. And so you can have that discussion with the AHRB and say, what do you recommend if I can't afford the slate roof? And they'll be able to help you figure that out. Because Lee Ellman said something great today. He said, we decided that we don't want to, when the neighborhood is designated as historic, we don't want to treat these people like they have a disease. We want to treat them like they're special. And we want to give them extra help to do the right thing and make it as nice as possible for everybody, and to also encourage other neighborhoods to do the same thing. So it's mostly about preventing people from doing crazy sort of, maybe trend-driven changes to these homes that can never be undone.
Okay.
And part of I've kind of gone back and forth on this argument whether we should have consent at 50% as recommended or not at all, or a different percentage. And part of my concern is where the consent comes in the process, because it's the first thing. The way it's written, you can't get your application in without having 51%, right? And so your knee-jerk reaction as a property owner, which was my own personal knee-jerk reaction as a homeowner, was I don't want somebody else telling me kind of what I've been saying. I don't want somebody else telling me what I can and can't do with my house. I bought my house, and I don't want to create something that's a lot more expensive for me to maintain or to do anything with. And I understand all those concerns, but on the same hand, after I heard your presentation last time, I kind of started weighing out all the pros and cons, and there was a lot of things I was uneducated about personally, as far as like the property values being increased by being marked historical versus not. And so I'm concerned about if we grant consent at that point in the process, that we're taking away treasures to the village based on a homeowner's knee-jerk reaction without education. So like, I do agree that the public hearing allows for the dialogue, and we can bring in historical experts that can explain, and maybe that changes somebody who said no in that neighborhood to, wow, that's really interesting, and I'm all for that, and moves them in the other direction. But the way it's written now, we don't get that opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I guess I have a 2-point question. I mean, one, that's part of an argument for not having consent at all, but it's also, is there a possibility of having consent and then an override by the village, like still having a public hearing about an application with the notation that there's not consent? I don't know, I'm thinking out loud as I'm listening to you.
Right, so consent is more of a guideline than a requirement.
Yeah, because I mean, if you have like you were saying, like in Yonkers, so like if they had, they could have done whatever they wanted, I guess, because they don't require consent, but after listening to the public hearing and listening to all the reasons, they decided not to do a historic district that they thought was in the best interest for whatever reasons they did after hearings. Like, what if we have Belden, which I know is what prompted all of this, and then we can't get the 51% consent, but we as a community, Dobbs Ferry, not just the 7 people sitting up here, think it has a real value to the historic charm and quaintness of Dobbs Ferry that we want to maintain, that we don't want to become, like, get rid of all these old buildings and not have Victorian homes anymore and have just modern homes. And 5 homeowners prevented us from doing that for a village of over 11,000 people. So I'm having trouble weighing the concerns of the whole village and the individual property owners, because I think they're both really important. And I don't know how we come out on it or how we balance it.
Yeah, I had the same kind of concern. I keep going back and forth, but the argument for non-consent is that we have a very special village, and we're so upset because we're losing a lot of the Rivertown feel of the village with some of the developments and stuff that's going on. And I think it behooves the village itself to retain its Rivertown qualities, to retain the historic buildings in our village. And as Nicole said, you know, for 5 people, you know, in a 10 home block, to stop the preservation of historic buildings that are so necessary to the identity of Dobbs Ferry, I think it's the idea of hopefully trusting the people who are making the decisions to be fair to the neighborhood.
Right. So I agree. I thought I wanted consent also, but the more I thought about it, I agree with how you concluded that. I think we're charged with the overall value of Dobbs Ferry, and I think as the Board of Trustees, we can make that decision based with public hearings and enough input that I think we can make that decision without requiring consent. So I think I'm leaning towards now not requiring consent and having us as the Board of Trustees take that as our mission, as our charge, to make sure that
The HRB does too.
And the
Right,
HRB as
right.
well.
Yeah, I think this process that you've described, especially the way it happened in Yonkers, it's a false dichotomy to think that having homeowner consent in the legislation is choosing between individual rights and collective rights. Because the process as it would be set up in a CLG status legislation would already give people a voice. It has a public hearing process before the HRB and before the Board of Trustees. That's 2 sets of hearings at which both boards can look at it from the point of view of the homeowners who are affected by it and the village as a whole. And we always have to balance individual property rights versus the community rights. And, you know, I think that structure sets it up to be balanced enough while still giving us the option of getting CLG status and grants. So personally, I think with all of the things you've mentioned, it would push me in that direction. I understand there was fervent debate in the task force about this, but I think as we unpack it and learn more about it and look at it, it doesn't seem like it's really taking too much away.
Sonia, I have a question in terms of the role of the Board of Trustees. And you had a slide both in terms of the board really in an application, in any application, whether it's a district or a structure, that would ultimately be the Board of Trustees that would decide, and also in the case of a demolition as well. Would that be true? Would the board play that role in every district? Is that the proposed legislation? Because right now, think of it in terms of the board right now, we have final site plan approval in 5 districts, right? Downtown, Gateway, the Rivertown Square area, the educational districts. But is the proposed legislation put the Board of Trustees in that position in every single district?
Of approving demolition permits?
Yeah,
or
of basically being the final authority in terms of creating an historical district, or not?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so it gets us back into looking at individual homes again, which is, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just want to be clear about this.
Only on demolition.
Only on
Only on demolition.
Well, no, but in creating as well.
In creating
As well,
and then in demolition.
And landmarking,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
okay. So it gets us, so we have that, the proposed legislation is the Board of Trustees would weigh in every single case, in every district.
Whenever somebody wants to designate something as historic, yes, it comes before
Okay.
you.
And there would be a public process.
Right, no, I
which is-
understand, yeah.
That would,
I know, it's a-
Can let's say you get a group or neighborhood together, how, there's in some of the historical districts, it's potentially that a structure or two might not qualify. I don't know, that falls within the guidelines, so it's sort of determined,
So contributing versus non-contributing?
yes, yeah,
Idea, yeah, so, in your application, you would have to identify which ones you suggest are contributing and which ones you suggest are non-contributing, and that's based on the scoring system that we've devised. So it's a pretty objective,
Right, yeah.
decision.
okay.
So-
So, what if one property owner decided, you know, guys, I just don't want to be involved in this? Could the other property owners agree that that property could be excluded?
You know, I really think that the decision of whether something should be contributing or non-contributing should be based on its historic value. That said, the process is gonna be a little bit of a give and take. And, you know, if somebody is really gonna just throw themselves down and kill the entire district over one property, you know, maybe that's an area where you can sort of say, well, how important is this building relative to the overall district being designated?
Yeah, it kind of would be subjective there, and it wouldn't necessarily assume that that property owner wants to kill it or wants to build something, demolish and do something, you know, like a modern structure there or something.
Yeah,
That would be a fear maybe that you would have that.
right.
But I'm just asking the question, if there's flexibility where, because that sort of gets back to the consent thing a little bit. Obviously, there's some difference of opinions on the board in terms of consent, how much and not. And I understand the arguments about the greater good of the public, and that is what we are here to do. But property rights are still really important too, so it's an interesting discussion, but.
It would be hard to make a case, if you have, like, on Belden Avenue, you have a very sort of uniformly historic block where all of the houses are almost equal in their historic value. It would be really hard to make a case that one of them doesn't belong. So I don't see that really happening very often, you know, but.
Well, it could just be, and then a new homeowner comes in and says, hey, man, I want to be involved now, so you pick it up one another. Which leads me to my next question is, I don't know if there's any studies on this, but maybe there has been, or just a general feeling about how these, what attracts people to historical districts. People that buy homes on Belden, I would think, are buying homes on Belden, not because they want to tear those houses down, but because they want to live in one of those houses, or they want to renovate it and bring it back. And I'm just, so the question really is that generally true for neighborhoods that, have historical buildings? Do you think, it's
Yeah.
fair to say that most of the people that want to go into those neighborhoods are there because of the way it looks and want to maintain that?
I can only speak to my personal experience. I lived in a historic district in Philadelphia, and it was like prized property. I mean, it was really considered very prestigious to live in a historic district in Philadelphia because it meant you were part of this community of people who are investing in their homes, who care what their neighborhood looks like, and who care about doing the right thing architecturally. And so, we were all very like-minded in buying into that district. And I also enjoyed the boost in property value that occurred because of that.
Okay. And then I just had one last question, was the design guidelines. I know they're not, is there any time frame? Do you have any sense of when that might be, you could get that before us at all, or?
So we were at the mercy of Steve Tilley. He originally volunteered to do this. Now he's saying it would be really nice if we could find grant money to pay for it. Irvington paid him to do it. I understand how much work is involved, and I think it's a fair request. Getting CLG status would help us get a grant to pay for his time, but that's a long road. It's going to take a long time to get a grant. So I still need to talk to him about how we do that. He said maybe we do a preliminary draft that would be just for Belden Avenue for now, that just applies to those styles of houses, and then we can expand it over time, you know, that's a possibility.
Just on grants, just out of curiosity that you brought that up, if we did get to that point, do we need grant writers to write these grants, or would we be doing that ourselves, or?
I heard Fiona is awesome. Yeah, I mean,
Who writes it? Isn't that the property, is it property owner?
That's what I'm asking, like, that's
Isn't the
another
property
expense.
owner that would be writing,
no,
requesting it, or
so
the
if you're-
the CLG does it?
Yeah, the CLG applies for a grant and says, you know, we're applying for money to
Okay.
hire a consultant.
Right, okay.
Okay.
I wonder, while we're in the subject of grants, the numbers, well, not trivial, up to $60,000, some of those, I guess I'm trying to get it framed, the expectations for what, you know, a village of our size could expect, right? I mean, what's a typical, you know, over, I don't know, a 3-year or 5-year timeframe amount of grants that a municipality might receive?
That I do not know the answer to. I just know the size of the typical individual grants.
But I mean, would a typical municipality get 5 grants in a year or a 2-year period, 10 grants?
Probably not.
There is a list of grants that have been given recently, and I know, for example, one of the ones I saw, Syracuse got 2 years in a row. One year they got 16,000, the next year they got like 13,000, so they did get a couple within a short time frame.
16 and 13.
Yeah, which is not insignificant
No,
money
they're
to,
bigger than we are. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. All
No,
I'm saying is, I'm
I'm
just
just
trying to
saying there
think how
was a
many
long
hoops we want to
list
jump
of
through for CLG
municipalities.
status
Yeah,
if it ends up, you know, being onerous enough that it isn't offset by.
yeah, it's not, you know, it's not a pot of gold. And, you do have to work regularly with the State Historic Preservation Office to maintain your status. You have to submit a report every year that shows that you're actively keeping everybody trained, and they have to review your legislation periodically to make sure you're still.
They're
What do
also
you think the
for-
cost would be? So there is a cost to maintaining a CLG, right? We have to maintain, probably have accounting, auditors, and you have to have some legal work that's done, right? To maintain the
I
entity?
think you'd need auditors.
It won't be that, it won't be.
So it doesn't,
You'll just be certified.
it's not passing money, so, you know, maybe there isn't an auditing
I've
function.
never heard of any expense.
Okay, so there's not a real expense to maintaining.
Other than
the
grant,
entity.
writing
The
application.
the grant writing would be an expense, but then you're expecting more in return. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just want to say, when I was looking at this issue, you know, over the last couple of weeks, I did look at our vision plan and, you know, the districts that have been recommended in historic, so I can have like a better understanding of what we're really talking about. And to me, it seems to really be like a handful of districts. It's not the entire village, which I think is important. But the consistent message was kind of like what Donna said, is that we want to adopt districts or areas, buildings, so that we're preserving our historic river town and that we make it a walking destination for people. And I think when we look at our current code as it is, and as reading the proposed legislation that we're adopting in, we say in 317A5, you know, that Dobbs Ferry has a special responsibility owing to its location on the Hudson River waterfront and its many historic resources to guide future changes to its physical design and the appearance of its buildings, structures, and landscapes in a manner that preserves and enhances the village's traditional appearance, natural features, historic features, and sense of place. And so I just know that, like, you know, when we're looking at from this individual homeowner or homeowners in a district, 10 homeowners, they're not looking at anything from that perspective. They're just looking at it from their own individual perspective. And so that
This is an old one.
raises concerns for me. So I kind of guess I want to ask you the question, is there a way to, if we go with the consent route, is there a way to educate homeowners about the importance of their buildings or stuff before they say yes or no?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think education is a huge part of this whole effort. And one of the reasons that I went about doing this was I thought it was important to educate everybody in Dobbs Ferry about this and why it's important. So, yeah, I would hope that we could, I would hope we would have more participation.
I was actually hoping that the task force members that had wanted consent would have been here to answer some of these questions too, because it would have been helpful to hear their perspective since they
Yeah.
fought strongly for it, so.
Right, yeah. I mean, I've been doing a lot with the Historical Society's newsletter and with the enterprise, trying to get the word out as much as possible on this. But I think we could also look at future ideas for public meetings and forums where people can come and learn about it. I mean, you can't force them to come, obviously. Yeah, I agree with you, education is key.
But it is
Okay,
good to, just stepping back from the consent topic, and just having this legislation in place, you know, when people come to look at properties in Dobbs Ferry or come as tourists, or people in Dobbs Ferry are asking, well, you know, how do we save some of these buildings that we really like? The way the legislation is laid out, you know, it's, if we do adopt this in Dobbs Ferry, I think it gives a lot of people assurance that despite a lot of the major changes in our village over the last few years, there are measures in place to preserve the character, the integrity, the unique, quaint qualities of this village. And there are many buildings throughout Dobbs Ferry that are very historic, and not just districts, but landmarks, potential landmarks.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think just stepping back from the CLG status that we were talking about, just overall, you know, I just want to, you know, make it clear, I think this is going to be really good for Dobbs Ferry as a whole. And I think these properties in these districts, especially Belden, which I know is the first one that may be on the agenda, they are really the cultural property of the community as well, and they improve all of our property values to the extent that we preserve them. So I'm really happy that you've done all this work, the task force has done all this work, because I think it'll give us a tool to keep Dobbs Ferry the way we love it.
I just have one more
Thanks.
quick question, because when you were talking before about the front-facing only, I know, maybe I might not be describing it right, but I think that's behind Maple, they have a milk lane. They have an unfelt, I mean, are we talking about not preserving that? Because that seems pretty historical in itself, that we even have something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on our application for Belden Avenue, and the existence of those lanes is part of what's going into our application as a very important characteristic that is historic, that has a lot of meaning to our streets. So
Right.
when those things go into the application creates this written record of all the research we've done, photographs we've found, maps that we've looked at, and explains why those things are important and why they need to be preserved. So then you have a written document to turn to when somebody wants to say, oh, let's get rid of the milk lane.
Right, but the homes that are, I'm thinking more in the context of the homes that are facing the milk lane, is the rear side now gonna be part of the historic
Oh, yeah.
limitations on changes?
That's an interesting question, because it's not really a public road, but there are a lot of very historic outbuildings back there. So there's a lot of original barns, for example, which would be a shame to lose. So
Don't people traverse the lanes, or no?
really only people who live there and the trash guys.
Can we take some comment from the public? Anybody like to ask any questions or have any opinion?
Can I ask?
Sure, Bob. Anybody else at all? No? Dwight, I think we'd like just a quick comment from you too.
Brought something along.
Okay.
What's that?
After you.
Oh, sorry. Bob McLaughlin, 6 Hollywood Drive. Sonia did a wonderful job in pulling this all together, and I think the presentation was terrific. And I do think, as Annalisa was saying, that something like this is very important to the village, to retain that historical Rivertown charm. I'm familiar with, I don't know if you're in society, know about it?
I didn't live there.
Oh, yeah, it's one of the historic districts, and I've lived down there for a while. It's absolutely beautiful, and it does make a difference first planned community in the United States. And it really still is a beautiful community with all the colonial and Victorian homes. The other one that comes to mind is Ocean Grove, New Jersey. And if you've been down there, I mean, the whole town is just spectacular with Victorians and so forth. So I think it is really important. And I know it's a tough decision for the board to weigh consent or not. But I think it's something we should continue to pursue. I'm sort of a new kid on the block, so I personally would like to take a look at it further, but I think it's important that we really make a good effort to move forward with it.
Thanks, Bob. Any other comments from the public at all? Yes.
Hi, I'm Jen Cadenhead from 12 Belden Avenue, and I want to thank Sonia and the committee. I have been busy with other things and haven't been able to help out, but I really do think that having a historic district, especially on Belden, is a really great idea. I'm a tiny bit concerned about consent, not for the reason that maybe you guys think, but only because like in this particular date and time, we have, I think, 5 vacant homes. So I would like some level of consent. Actually, I would really support it, and the reason I would support it is because, for instance, I have 2 neighbors, one neighbor to the right of me who has a great big lot and passed away, and that lot could be subdividable, and if it was subdividable, I don't know what would go in that area, and it would completely destroy the block to have a house that's completely out of character with the rest of the block. Right there beside me. Same thing across the street from that house. Those people are redoing the house, and I don't think they're going to subdivide that lot. But yeah, it's their right to be able to do that. But what does that do to the whole community? I grew up in the South, and I grew up in a town that had areas that were historic, and they were beautiful. People would come from miles around to just look at those homes. And then we had other homes that, yes, this is the American way to have a mismatch of whatever you want, but it really takes it up a notch when you designate an area as a historical district. And I think the homes on Belden are lovely. I actually looked purposely for a Victorian home and was so grateful to be able to find that home in Dobbs Ferry. I really, loved living in this village, and I think several of you mentioned the historical quality about Dobbs Ferry. And yeah, I think some of the housing that have been put up recently just don't have the same kind of charm. That's their right, yeah, sure. But I actually moved to my home because it was a Victorian and it wasn't a beautiful neighborhood. And I would love to be able to preserve that.
So just to clarify, Jen, by consent, you mean you want those houses owned by the people you mentioned, you want those owners to be able to say they don't consent and have it stop historic district status, or you don't want them to be able to have the right to stop it through this consent mechanism?
Oh, maybe I was misunderstanding.
Oh, okay.
But I
just want to make sure
okay,
we
yeah,
got your viewpoint clear.
Yeah, so, like I said, I've been a little bit absent.
No, but I think what you're saying is if there is a consent right where 50% have to consent or else it doesn't get made into a district, that would defeat some of what you're hoping to see happen in Belden. In other words, you don't want that.
You're leading the
to
witness
be a
here.
bar.
I think what she
because
meant was she was
your comments
concerned,
were
like-
opposite of
Yeah.
that.
I think it's a simple question. Do you think that we should require consent from 50% of the homeowners on Belden or no consent?
You don't have to answer if you don't want to.
You don't have to. I was trying to understand her viewpoint, but I didn't understand.
I didn't either.
I
That's
don't-
one way, then twist
Yeah,
it.
I mean, like, if you want to have the conversation in the greater community, it's great, so. But personally, I feel like it should be a historic district, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think we get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else care to comment?
Can I just ask one other?
Sure, Bob.
Sonia, have you surveyed the existing district to see what, do you have a feel percentage-wise?
You mean as far as consent?
As far
Or
as
consent?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have well over 50%.
Okay.
So on Belden Avenue, it's no issue.
Dwight, could we ask you to just, weigh in a little bit? I know you had some comments I think you sent us prior to the meeting. This is, well, I'll let Dwight introduce himself.
Thanks, Mayor. Dwight Douglas, I'm the village's consulting planner, and fortunate enough to be on the team that Sonia took the lead on and create this wonderful document. I thought that to some advantage, to go back through the process a little bit, as mentioned earlier about the vision plan. And that vision plan was adopted in September 28, 2010, and had a generic environmental impact statement filed for it before it was adopted. There were 30 work sessions. The vision plan identified a series of issues regarding the neighborhoods that were interested in preserving, and flagged 4 specific neighborhoods as potentially good areas for historic district designation. Belden, which Sonia has been taking the lead on, it says in the vision plan that they recommend that they adopt heritage or historic district guidelines to protect the historic character of the neighborhood. Then on Maple, establish a heritage district or historic district along Maple Street. Then in Old Town, carry out historic-minded regulations that could include designating parts as historic districts. And then Osborne, create historic district protection for Clinton Avenue. So this work was done for you, studied, an environmental impact statement prepared and analyzed to look at how to protect certain neighborhoods using this specific tool. That zoning ordinance was put in place, and the zoning ordinance had language in it related to historic district regulations, but they were absent with certain factors that Sonia's been dealing with. So in March of 2015, the ad hoc Dobbs Ferry Historic District Task Force was put together, and it had a mandate for the following objectives. These are among those. To determine whether the process for creating historical districts outlined in the current code is adequate and recommend updates if necessary. Draft legislation clarifying how historic districts will be regulated, and consult regularly with the New York State Preservation Office. So the draft legislation in front of you tonight was prepared, submitted to the Board of Trustees, which forwarded it to the Planning Board, which adopted by resolution on March 2nd, 2017, after duly noticed public hearing, recommended that the regulations be approved. I think we've gone back and forth on this 50% issue, as did the task force. And it seems like we're just going to be in this moment of back and forth forever. One of the things I think that I could recommend that the ordinance can be adopted and modified. And one of the ideas we had early for the task force was to do a pilot project, and that was going to be Belden. And Belden can meet the 50% requirement. So for those who are firm, let's get a CLG, let's get that all done. We could put together, you could adopt the regulations as you have them. Belden could proceed, and you would have potentially a historic district. If you then decided that you really wanted to, and some of the other neighborhoods did not seem so supportive, that it was vital to go and put the CLG status back in, you could go back in and modify the legislation. So I would recommend, if the only issue is the 50%, that you could treat it as an adopted legislation, allow Belden to proceed, and then take a look at that issue in the future. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Dwight, and thank you, everybody, for your comments. We had a good discussion here on the board. I think, let's kind of get a sense for where we want to take this now. I think the consent issue, I'm not so sure we'll go back and forth forever on it, actually. I think there's some views that maybe were even changed a little bit. I did find it interesting, you gave the example of the Yonkers public hearing and sort of what happened there. And I know for certain that nobody up here, everybody up here takes their responsibility really seriously in terms of any decision that we make is in the context of what's in the best interest of the overall community and the majority of residents. And that's kind of what ties into that concept. So I felt a little bit better about that myself, because consent to me was very important personally. I had an issue with that, just to get sort of back to property rights. But I found that to be pretty interesting. But I do think we're not quite 100% in terms of where our consensus is right now. And I personally feel, my recommendation is that we still need a little bit more time to work through that. I would have liked to have also seen the design guidelines. I know we can do this without having those guidelines like you're suggesting, and we can sort of add them and modify them, but I feel a little uneasy, and it may not be possible that we even have them the next time we meet. I think it was kind of what you're saying too, that it's still a work in progress, but maybe there are Belden guidelines that we can do, and that's another way to approach it. We could be a little bit more confident maybe that this could be a first step for Belden, because we know we've got close to 100% consent there, and then we could move and modify from that point on. So, but that's my thought. So I'd like to hear what some of the other board members think in terms of where we want to go from here tonight.
I have a procedural question. Since we are having this toss-up of full consent, 50% or no consent, would it be, I know and it's hard would it be easier to have another public hearing at no consent and then be able to make it less restrictive without having to have another public hearing? Do you know what I mean? Are we better to go with the most restrictive and then be able to go less restrictive without another public hearing? Because if we want to go to no consent, we've noticed this as 50%. And if we want to go to no consent, we'll have to have another public hearing. Am I correct?
I think you need to get a consensus, whether tonight or offline, of what you would like. And if we change it from 50 to any other percent, I would renotice it to ensure that the law is.
Right.
Yeah, since it's been
That makes
noticed
sense.
with that provision in it,
Yeah.
it seems like we'd have to renotice.
Okay, so we can notice it on that basis that we are considering the consent.
If you want to have zero, if you guys want zero consent, there's 4 members or 7, whatever number is, that want to adopt that law, we would renotice it.
I just want to point out while we're having this conversation, because I don't think we raised it, and I thought about it last week, is that when you're talking about 51% consent, 50%, okay, 50% consent, then you end up with, you could end up in a district where 50% say no, and they get overruled, right, by their neighbors. And so you have 50% of the community that's unhappy, and then you're impeding on their property rights with the whole purpose of having consent. So I think, from my perspective, that's like almost an argument weighing against the consent.
Right.
So you have a neighborly problem
Yes.
there, right?
You have a
Yeah,
neighborly
yeah,
problem. It's not
yeah.
like, because you have 50% say yes, and in theory, and 50% say no, and 50% are unhappy, and 50% are happy. And so, whereas by do a public hearing and the board weighs everybody's concerns equally, it's almost fairer than the consent process. And it takes out the whole
Right.
education consent at the front end part, which I have serious concerns about if we want
You
to
can still
grant
arrive
consent.
at that point anyway,
Yeah.
though.
You could rise to the point where the entire neighborhood's unhappy with the board, in theory.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
And that's the
I hear
purpose
what
of
you're
the
saying.
public hearing.
I hear what you're
Yeah.
saying, and it almost argues against 50% as the number, that if you view the process, whether there's no consent or any consent, as involving the public hearings and airing views and giving multiple opportunities for neighbors to weigh in, it would almost imply you'd be better with a lower threshold, like 30. This is what I meant by saying consent, to me, in my head, is the wrong word.
Right.
And at various times in this process, I'll admit, I got a little confused about what that meant. It's not a binding vote. It really is more of a group of people nominating their community or their neighborhood to be considered to be a historic district. And then there's a process with public hearings, public input, especially from the neighbors. And it's hard to envision a scenario where if there were, well, no, maybe I shouldn't say that, because I suppose a board could at some point push something through, but it's more of a nomination in a sense if it's a lower number than something that's a deciding, vote, so to speak.
Which then makes the consent not really worth anything anyway. Then one person could just nominate the district and let the AHRB and where a trustee weigh in public hearings. That statement makes it seem like there's no point having.
I think it
Not at
still
all.
suffers the same problems of it not, of it coming at a point in the process where people haven't had a chance to be educated about what does it mean to be
What's
designated a
historically
historic
significant?
district.
Like, I didn't, and before Sonia brought all this up, I didn't know who Laura Belden was, or what Belden was named after, or why it's historically significant. I had no concept, so I agree.
Right.
And that's why the public hearings are so educational, because it brings all of this knowledge together in one place, and people can have dialogue about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm afraid of neighbors pitting against neighbors and saying, we want, pressuring them to sign something that, they don't feel comfortable signing, without having enough information. So, I think that's why I would think they shouldn't have a consent at all in that situation.
I think we have another person
Okay.
who wants to speak,
So-
Mayor.
Well, has she been recognized?
Yeah.
Would you care to make a comment? Okay.
Sandra Merrill, 32 Long Street. I'm excited about horse historic districts. I just, I agree with that education process, and that's why I ran down tonight, because I was watching. I'm just thinking about the codification of a historic district and moving towards that, and Belden being kind of the example or the template, and how that ties together with the education process. Do we need to bring more of the public closer into the education process to get them excited? Because we're going to codify it, right? An historic district and that process, but really a lot of people don't understand what's going on. Could we get actually more informed before we codify it, so that it's not such a big, I'm excited about it, but let's get other people excited about it and make that, I saw Steve Tilley's presentation when he gave suggestions for the whole corridor, and that made me excited.
Sandra, I can say, we've been at this for a long time. It's actually been in the mayor's newsletter a few
Yeah.
times. We've announced the public hearings. I've put them in the newsletter. A lot of people, this has been out there. So if you're not up to speed on what's, and I would say that, you haven't been paying attention to this.
I'm not
So,
up to speed, I'm suggesting
okay.
to get
But
more
education is a big part of
excited.
it, you're
Yeah.
right, and I think that that's what we want to do here as part of it, but we're well into this, and I think, we're well into it.
I'm here to support it.
Well, and
Great.
also if we do, I don't know how we're gonna come out, but if we do decide to renotice it, it'll give an additional public hearing session for people to get more informed about it. So-
And also and Darcy pointed this out earlier to us, we're not designating, this legislation does not designate Belden as a historic district. This legislation is just allowing the process to occur. So this is just to, if Belden wants to do it, okay, we now have a way for Belden to do it.
That's important. That was important.
Yeah.
Thank you, Donna.
That's because I think that's where you were going, yeah.
Okay, so I think we're close, but we need to find a little bit stronger consensus. And I think tonight was really productive. My recommendation would be that we spend another 2 weeks, the board, we can bounce things off of you still, we can take some further input, anybody wants to write to us, and come back here in 2 weeks' time and notice it, however we need to notice it, whatever we might be considering, however specific.
If you keep it as
put
it
it on the
is,
consent.
I think you should adjourn the public hearing for today to whatever date it is, June 13th.
Which is 3
And
weeks.
then in the meantime, if we have a consensus of what you want to do, if it's less than the 50% or more, whatever the number is of consent, quote unquote, we will renotice it for that day too.
How much notice do we need for a public hearing?
I think we need 5 days, so we need enough time to get it to the paper. So we'll need it for Monday, I'll have to talk to Liz about when we gotta get it to the
Okay.
paper.
Because
Like
it's
a
3
week or
weeks
so.
before our next meeting, actually, I think.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah, let me look
There's
at-
an extra
is it-
week.
So that
But
gives
it's
us extra
possible.
time, that's good.
But I wanted to go back to, I think it was Donna or Annalisa said it, with the, putting in a notice for the most restrictive, and then if we decide, as a board, the majority decides they want 30% or 50% or something else, does it have to be renoticed at that point, or we could just adopt it at that
I
point?
mean, the most restrictive, I would argue, is 100%.
Right, it'd be going the other way,
And that 50,
Right.
but I would renotice it anyway.
closer to
I
100.
think you're supposed to
is
notice it
more
because some people
restrictive.
would say it's less restrictive if
Yeah.
you impose on them.
I
I
would
think the
renotice
issue
it.
No, no, I'm
is,
saying,
I think the issue is,
the next public hearing, we have a legislation that we're considering that has no consent.
yeah.
We've already considered one at a public hearing that has 50%. So if we decided to do something between 0 and 50, would we have to renotice it, or would we be okay?
Yeah, that's a question.
To Robert's rules.
Is that a
I would wanna
material
renotice-
change?
Charlene and I spoke about this.
Is it
If something
material?
changes, we would want to renotice it.
Okay, I understand that, I wanted to understand it for timing perspective too, because I think it's important to get this process moving, and
Yeah.
I know Sonia, you guys, the task force has worked really hard for 2 years to get this done, and I don't wanna slow it down and go
No,
on
no, not at all.
but-
And
My
I think,
recommendation would be that we do our best to get to a final vote on June 13th,
Yeah.
because I don't want to see this go any longer. I don't want to see the house next to you, Jen, fall over without us being able to do anything about it. So that would be my recommendation.
yeah, I think that's exactly right, is that we're coming back here whenever we meet again, and we'll notice it properly to take action. And we don't know where that is quite yet. It could be full in CLG 0, right? Or we could just stay at 50.
Well, I
And-
don't
and
think that
Whatever, so.
we can still have the no consent and not go for CLG. We
No,
don't have
no,
to.
exactly, right, you go all in. So that's not,
Sonia, can I
that's
just
not
ask-
possible.
All right, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna ask, you may have been about to ask the same thing. If you think that the guidelines as adopted by Irvington would be a good example, for the board and the public to sort of see what these guidelines would look like, I would encourage you to distribute them so that that might just help everybody get their arms around how this would work.
Yeah, what I think was also helpful tonight was the sort of describing the kind of work that would be under, would fall into this, that it's not internal work. You want to do bathroom and a fancy whatever, tile, whatever, that doesn't come into play. And it's really more the frontage part of the building. That was big. That's a big that makes a big difference, I think.
I just have one more question about when you get to the Belden, when you get to the application process, I mean, are you talking about like the Belden that's described in the vision plan, or a different Belden? I know, but when you look at Belden under the vision plan, it's a much larger district to me. Maybe Dwight can speak better to it, because he's probably had more experience with it than just Belden Avenue, right? So.
Yeah, we're starting with 12 houses on one block.
Okay.
But I would like to see that expanded in the future once we've ironed out, the process. I'm seeing it as like a test case. And then absolutely, Maple is full of historic homes.
Well, this isn't Maple, this would be an expansion of what you consider Belden. That they recommended that we adopt a historic district for. And I think some of it includes the landing area and I don't know if I'm reading right, so I'm not
The
gonna talk
flats,
anymore.
Yeah, no, it is
It's
a
clear
bigger
in the vision
area.
plan.
It is a much bigger area.
It's a much bigger area, so I just wanted to
Referred to
understand the
as
scope
building,
of what you're.
but we're
what you're
specifically
mentioning.
Yeah,
We're looking at that
talking
block.
about just some specific houses to start within that.
We're starting with 12 houses, but we
Yeah.
could expand it.
Thank you.
So,
Add one other thing.
yes,
I forgot to also say that, I have gotten multiple letters from filmmakers who want to come and film in my house because it's a historic house. So it adds revenue to the village. I haven't done it, but that's another story.
You don't want to. Not inside the house. No, it's not worth it.
okay. Thanks again for all your comments. So I think we're okay in, we're gonna come back here on the 13th. We'll notice it properly, and we'll have consensus then, I think. And we may still have some discussion, but I think it'll be a good thing. Sonia, thank you so much. Really, we spent a lot of time on this tonight, but it was really important. It was important that we had this discussion in public, and we could sort of air this out a little bit and free flow it. So, thanks for your time. It was really, really, really very helpful.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dwight, as well, for coming.
Thank you so
all
much.
for your comments. I'll take a motion now to adjourn the public hearing. Trustee Golio, second trustee Taylor, all in favor? And that passes with 7 ayes. Great. And thanks to all the trustees, really a lot of really good discussion, great comments. Courtesy of the floor, is there anybody here who would like to address the board on anything that's on the agenda or on your mind, or anything at all? No? Okay. Then we'll move to matters requiring action. First, action item number 1 is to consider a motion to approve audit number 3, audit number 4, audit number 5 for May 2017 as recommended by the village treasurer. We're good? Okay, you guys looked it over?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll take a motion then to approve audits 3, 4, and 5 for May 2017 as recommended and presented by village treasurer. Is there a motion? Trustee Taylor, second trustee Rosillo, discussion, all in favor? That matter passes with 7 ayes. Action item number 2 is to consider a motion to approve a request from iPic Gold Pass Class Entertainment for a waiver of Village Code, Section 300-50 signs, B general standards, B5 exterior lights, uplighting. I don't think tabling this is the right word, but we're gonna revisit this in a couple of weeks.
Lay it over for.
The building department is completely on top of the issue, has been spending a lot of time. Ed Manley was down there this weekend. They don't have the lights quite figured out yet, and so they want to spend a little bit more time to make sure it gets right, and have asked for another 2 weeks to do that. I think we're okay with that, but they gotta get it right, so that's where we are.
And in addition, he also did check the other lights on the parking lot. He determined that mitigation that needs to be done so it doesn't shine into the residential areas.
Okay, so we want to thank Charlene for staying on top of this, and thank Ed Manley.
Yes, Charlene and Ed have done a lot of work.
Right, and we want to thank Ed Manley and the building department because he's been very, very responsive, and he spends a lot of time there, and he spends a lot of time all over the town with a lot of things going on.
He was up on the roof.
Doing a really great job, yeah.
Please tell me he felt like Batman. Please be careful, Ed Manley.
Okay, so that's that. Action item number 3 is to consider resolution for a grant for the Village of Dobbs Ferry Main streetscape improvements. Oh, do I need a motion?
Yeah, you need a
For
motion.
number 2?
Do we do
Lay it
that?
over.
Oh, no, we don't, because we're not gonna, we're not taking action on the waiver, we're just gonna wait another 2 weeks, so we're not taking action. So, resolution for a grant for the Village of Dobbs Ferry, Main streetscape improvements.
This is one of the first resolutions that you're going to have to pass in the sense that it is guaranteeing that we will meet the 20% needed for the initial project, and that's various engineering, et cetera. That would be 149,000 of the 380,000 total grant.
And could you just summarize what this,
This is for I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is for the streetscape on Main Street for ADA improvements. And that's very, very important to us. And we're paying 20% of that 386,000. And some of it is in kind, some of it is general fund. So.
okay.
So if we receive this grant, we're essentially getting 80% of ADA upgrades on Main Street paid for.
Oh, we're getting it. This is just our commitment to spend some money.
Yep.
But we're spending the money on the basis that we're gonna get it, so it's,
We got it.
you know,
Yeah, we
yeah, right,
have it.
so it's just our contribution to the total amount, basically.
The government wants to know that we are committed to spending.
Yeah,
That's great.
so it's sort of a matching,
Yes.
it's a matching grant. Okay, any other questions on this? Then I'll take a motion to, let's see, what am I taking a motion here?
Yeah, there's a lot of papers in there that was not necessary. The resolution is here, if you want to pass it down, because it was like
I kinda
in the
got lost
midst
in
of
there a little bit.
300,000 trees.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna, you've described and explained to the
Yes.
public and the board what these funds would be used for.
Yes.
And we understand that this is not just money that's out the door that we're not quite sure we're gonna get back. We know there is gonna be the return, and it's essentially 20% of the total, so it's sort of our matching contribution.
And it doesn't have to be spent now, really.
Right. So then, take a motion, and this would be for a resolution for the Village of Dobbs Ferry, the Board of Trustees, which will authorize the implementation and funding in the first instance, 100% of the federal aid eligible costs of a transportation federal aid project and appropriating funds thereof. And I'll just leave it at that. I think that's really it. Is there a motion? Trustee Golio, second trustee Cassell, discussion, all in favor? And that passes with 7 ayes. Great. And that's good stuff. Always good to get money, right? And then the 2 items that we added at the very beginning, Action item number 4, which was added, is simply to give approval for the Dobbs Ferry Historical Society to hang their house tour banner at Gould Park, and this will be for their event that will be held on June 4th. So this is just a procedural thing. Is there a motion? Trustee Corrales, second. Trustee Sullivan, discussion. All in favor? And that passes with 7 ayes. Dobbs Ferry Historical Society had a great event this past weekend. On Sunday, they honored 3 kids from Dobbs Ferry's school district who wrote winning essays on the importance of monuments. And the Historical Society supported it, and it was really great. These are great kids that wrote about how important it is to maintain monuments in your village, in your state, and I was really pleased to be there, and they were great kids. And they were really deserving of their rewards, and it was good to see young people at the Historical Society. There was a good turnout, and they really cared about the history, and they cared a lot to write these things. So it was a great event. So just wanted to put a little shout out there for the Historical Society, and this tour that they do on June 4th is great. They actually tour around and visit some historical buildings in Dobbs Ferry, so it's a really nice thing to do. And the final action item number 5 is to approve the holiday hustle, and we want to get the right dates on this, Vinnie, right?
December 10th, 2017.
December 10, 2017. So look for a motion then to approve the holiday hustle date this year to be on December 10, 2017. Is there a motion? Trustee Rosillo, second. Trustee Corrales, discussion. All in favor? Great, that passes with 7 ayes.
That's not the same day as the tree lighting, is it?
It might be.
You know, it's okay, though. It's
Yeah,
on a
I
think
holiday.
that's a good
I think it worked out
Yeah.
last time that way.
Actually,
That shouldn't be a bad thing.
It worked out last
Yeah,
time, I think,
so
that
a
way.
lot of people come out for
Right.
both.
I recommend for the holiday hustle that you have a microphone available. I think Vic was there trying to speak on the police car.
At the start.
Yeah, I ended up using the
Oh, yeah.
police car mic.
Yeah.
They were trying to give out awards and it was really hard.
Oh, you mean at the end?
Yeah, we had to speed that process up, because you have the people left already, so.
You do have to speed that process.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we don't have any minutes here, so I guess we'll do that the next time around.
I thought I saw-
I have minutes.
I have
What do we
minutes.
do?
Yeah, oh, the minutes for May 9th, there they are, yes, sorry. We do have them. Okay, so let's look at the minutes. This will be for the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for Tuesday, May 9, 2017. And, Vinnie,
I was not
you
there.
were not here, right?
No.
Right, so, okay, so we have them, and does anyone want to make any changes or any typos, any modifications? If not, then I'll take a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular Board of Trustees meeting for May 9th, 2017 as presented. Is there a motion? Trustee Golio, second. Trustee Corrales, discussion, all in favor, and that passes with 6 ayes. And 1 absent. Okay. No correspondence and claims, so I'll just ask the trustees if there's any reports or any updates at all. Nicole, anything from your end?
No, but I do want to make a public thank you, because we did a lot of thank yous during senior week, or coming up to it on all the businesses in the village that volunteered stuff to make it a great week, and space and food and everything. We should really do a big thank you to Abby Knet and Mike and Lindsay and Brad and everybody that's on the senior committee, because they did such a fantastic job of pulling it together, and there was so much enthusiasm from the seniors for all the events. It was all the buzz. And so I think they did a really good job with tough circumstances, and they deserve a big round of applause for pulling it together.
That's great, Nicole, thanks, and thanks so much for putting the time to be the liaison to the seniors. It's really a great program, and it's important. Thanks for doing that.
It really is.
It's good. Larry?
Nothing for me.
Donna?
Yeah, just to report that the CAB, along with the Friends of the Waterfront and village staff, did meet last week with the Central Park Conservancy. They came to the village. It's a free program, and we are going to be the pilot program. This is the first time the Conservancy has gone outside the city of New York to help villages they're going to assess. We did the tour of Waterfront Park, Memorial Park, and High Street Park. And they will be coming back to us with a report. And from that report, they will also work with us to set up a maintenance program ideas on what we can do, et cetera. So this is kind of very exciting. They were very excited about being here and the enthusiasm that was shown by the members who were there. Just another reminder that the new New York Bridge grant for Route 9 for the pedestrian bike study, the public outreach meeting is going to be, one will be in Hastings on June 15th, and then one in Tarrytown on June 17th. Official statements will be put out shortly, but just putting out to save the date because this is a very exciting prospect also. So.
Great. Thanks, Donna. Anna?
Yeah, the Recreation Department continues to accept applications for all of their different programs, including the summer camp. You can also get your pool pass. Those are on sale now. And the pool is getting ready. There's a lot of work going on to make it all ready for summer. So it's looking good. And I hope everyone will take part and enjoy it this summer. And don't forget that you can always sign up for the Recreation newsletter to get the latest news and to find out about all the wonderful programs they're offering. And they've done just such a magnificent job, especially with the Embassy Center being in the condition that it is. So I'm a Historical Society member, and speaking of the Historical Society, there was a longtime member who sadly passed away recently, Jean Fritz. She was a nationally recognized award-winning children's author, and she wrote a lot of nonfiction for children that really brought historical characters to life. And she was award-winning in many ways, and you could look her up. There's a lot about her on the internet, Jean Fritz. So I just want to recognize the gift that she brought to Dobbs Ferry. She was a longtime Dobbs Ferry resident, and I think what she's done for children to bring history alive has just been something so special, and so I want to recognize her.
Thank you. Hey.
The Youth Service Council wanted me to pass along, there's the Westchester Coalition for Drug and Alcohol-Free Youth is having a presentation called High in Plain Sight, and that presentation is going to be spread over 2 days. It's down the road. It's on August 16th or August 17th. It's going to be held at the Westchester Marriott Hotel in Tarrytown, and it's going to be conducted by someone named Jermaine Galloway, who worked in law enforcement and has experience as an alcohol compliance and enforcement officer. So he will talk about what he sees and how the stores and whatever should comply and how they don't comply. So that's going to be interesting. Also, the Youth Service Council, the kids are putting together a public service announcement. So they're, have they gotten the approval, Darius? Everything looks okay so far?
We're good to go.
Okay, so the script is being written, and they're going to be acting in it, and they've produced it, so it should be very interesting. So we should look for that, and I think it's going to be like a 1 minute or a 2 minute type of PSA, so it should be great. So,
Great, thank you.
Well, I'm good right now.
Okay. Well, that's great. Lots going on, and just one final announcement here. Remind everybody that this year's Memorial Day services will be held in the village on Monday, May 29th. The parade, the annual parade, will commence at Mohican Park, which is where it usually starts, at 10 a.m. So we'll step off at 10 a.m. The parade does march through the village and ultimately to the monument at Memorial Park, where another presentation is made. We also stop off in front of the Episcopal Church on Main Street. There'll be some remarks at the high school as well as Memorial Park, and a little different this year. We're going to end up going all the way down to the waterfront, and the fire department and the American Legion and everyone's very excited about this. It's kind of what they used to do in the old days, I guess, is they would put flowers out into the river. So we have that beautiful bluestone memorial that's there. So the idea will be to finish up at Memorial Park, which is what we usually do, and then hot dogs, and they'll have tents set up. They will have a grill, and the cold refreshments will be there, and everybody can go down to the waterfront, and we'll enjoy the ending and have some food there for finish off, which will be really great. So they're really excited about that. So hopefully, everybody can come out, and we'll get some good weather, and we're going to have a band this year too, the St. Chris marching Cobras will be back, and they were really great at the
Little
Little League, right? So they'll be back again, which is really good. So that's just the announcement from Memorial Day. Hopefully we see a lot of you out there. Okay, well, great meeting tonight. We made a lot of progress. I thought the historical district was really good. It's good conversation that we had, and that was very productive, and we appreciate everybody's comments. And I think, following up on what you said about Gene Fritz, let's close this meeting in honor and memory of Gene Fritz from Dobbs Ferry. Meeting's adjourned.